make sure that, okay, sorry.
Ingrid, you can try your video now. Awesome, thank you.
Thanks. So yes, just to reiterate, Paces Connection is very excited that the state of Hawaii has gone on this journey of becoming trauma informed. And we definitely want to talk through, why it's so important for state initiatives to embrace trauma informed practices, especially in areas where there has been a lot of historical trauma, and being very clear about how historical trauma is tied to, or is another type of trauma that definitely should be addressed in systems and at the state level. So we are very excited that ACEs Connection Hawaii has been a part of our community on PACES Connection for quite some time. And we are extremely excited about the initiative. And I wanted to take some time to share what we have available at PACES, and also to talk through the importance of addressing historical trauma. And so we have new services and different programs available as I have come on in the last year, one of which is the Creating Resilient Communities Accelerator, which I invite everyone to check out on our site. It is a program that is free to the public, and it really helps to paint the larger picture of historical trauma as really the source of what we would call social determinants of health and disparity. And in areas that have a historically traumatic past, what we find is that Indigenous peoples tend to have health disparities. And this is largely due to the trauma of colonization and other practices that are really harmful because they strip cultural identity and they displace land and things of this nature. And so I invite everyone to be a part of our Creating Resilient Communities program. I invite everyone to become a member. And again, I just want to express how excited I am that PACES Connection and ACES Connection Hawaii have such a strong relationship, and excited that the state of Hawaii has taken on the charge of becoming trauma informed. And I hope to hear more about, I want to make sure that we stay connected, and I hear more about your progress in this area. And I definitely want to make PACES Connection, or make it known that PACES Connection is a resource for everyone in the state, and that we consider ourselves to be in community with the state of Hawaii in this space. And I'm going to make sure that I get a PDF that I gave to Tia to everyone that really outlines how social determinants of health and health disparity is deeply rooted in historical trauma, and what it looks like to heal historical trauma. And so the steps that you're taking now in becoming trauma informed is really a step along the path to a just society, where you are healing the past and raising up communities that have long been underserved and mistreated. And we do this through incorporating trauma-informed practices and policies. So I'm very excited. And thank you for the invitation. And I definitely hope to continue our relationship as you go through this process. And thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Ingrid. So I want to encourage you all. There's a website in the very top of the chat that shares PACES Connection. That's the website that you can learn more about the program and see how you can get involved. And thank you for introducing you in the chat. We have a lot of service providers representing the entire state of Hawaii. And now I'd like to introduce you to our two other guest speakers today, Mr. Danny Goya and Ms. Tia Hartsock. Danny Goya is the CEO of Kealaho'aka, a trauma-informed trainer and wellness resilience coach and PACES Connection Hawaii manager. Mr. Goya is an educator with over 15 years of teaching experience, a community connector with 16 years of nonprofit and community work, and has had the trauma-informed care trainer, Mr. Goya employs a two-eye seeing approach, which creates a safe place for Western sciences and Indigenous cultural practices in working with communities to build wellness and resilience, to identify and address community issues, and to provide healing spaces for cultural and historical oppression. Mr. Goya is a graduate of the University of Hawaii and a graduate certificate studies in resilience-based approaches with family, schools, and communities from the University of Vermont. And then we have Ms. Tia Hartsock, who is a trainer and independent consultant, researcher, and evaluator for nonprofit state departments and federal agencies. Additionally, she's a project director of the Federal Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, at the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division in Hawaii's Department of Health. Tia is an adjunct lecturer at the University of Hawaii School of Social Work, and she received her Master's of Criminal Justice Administration from Chaminade University and her Master's in Social Work at the University of Hawaii. She is a SAMHSA certified trainer on trauma-informed care, and in July, she was selected as the chair of the statewide Trauma-Informed Care Task Force to implement Act 209. Ms. Hartsock has been working to improve the child and adult serving systems in mental health and criminal justice in Hawaii for the past 20 years. All right, Danny and Tia, I will leave it up to you. Oh, and let me start with a question. And the question will also be available in the chat. So, Tia, first question. What is the Office of Wellness and Resilience, and what was the impetus for creating it?
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to, again, thank you everyone for being here and for that great opening by Ingrid Cochran from the PACES Connection, the national organization. So I also wanted to say also thank you to HCAN for providing the support for this webinar, and PACES Hawaii, that the organization affiliate here in Hawaii that Danny Goya is offering, that he runs. Happy Aloha Thursday. We got off to a stressful start, but we will try and jump right in with our heads into this webinar to make sure that we provide as much information as we can. For this particular piece of legislation that created the Office of Wellness and Resilience, the impetus around it was the last 10 to 15 years of the work of trauma-informed care here in Hawaii. There's been so many people that have been intimately involved in this effort, from different departments, different nonprofits, different community groups, youth and families alike, trying to create a trauma-informed environment in all areas of what we do here in Hawaii, in communities and schools, etc. There's been so many efforts across the state to really identify, define, and inform on how we work with, approach, and respond to trauma and trauma survivors, not only individually, but as a community, as communities as a whole. And so when we think about the climate that we're in right now, and we think about all of the influences that are impacting us on a daily basis, the concept of community trauma as it relates to the history of this place and how we kind of build wellness and resilience, the trauma-informed care effort, again, within our communities, has been ongoing. What we used to do in our systems and what we still do today in some of our systems creates environments that can trigger, that can cause trauma. And so this effort really looks at how do we better approach our support, our services, ourselves to identify what trauma does and how we respond to it and how it shows up in our daily lives. So we were looking throughout, again, the last 15 to 20 years of how to better respond to those who have experienced, to all of us who have experienced trauma in our systems and in our communities. And when we think about the historical framework, that really informs the way that we show up on a daily basis. So the disproportionate representation specifically of minorities, and when I say minorities, we're talking about a large large portion of our populations, but for our purposes for this legislation, as well as for the task force, we were really wanting to focus on Native Hawaiians and the disproportionate representation of Native Hawaiians in our systems, and how we can better respond and create wellness within and throughout our daily lives. The disproportionate representation in the juvenile justice system, the criminal justice system, the mental health system, and the increased needs as we move forward throughout this ongoing pandemic has really impacted the way we have to rethink how we as a system, how we as a community, how we as a state address this. So the impetus really came from this, everybody on this call's efforts to do better, to improve the way in which we show up, to address how kids are and families are responding to the trauma in their lives on a daily basis, as well as the workforce and those of us who show up. We all have somewhat histories of trauma, have experienced grief, and the task force was developed from legislation back in 2021. And I'm sorry, 2021, when we looked at how the folks who developed this Act 209, how they looked and see, and Erica just dropped it in the chat. That was Office of Wellness, but we're talking about Act 209, the task force. And when we looked at what this task force wanted to address, was really trying to understand how to systematically develop a framework within the state systems to influence and inform and infuse trauma-informed principles. So with the principles, the 6 principles of trauma-informed care, and really looking at how that is able to systematically be woven throughout our systems and inform the way in which policies and procedures are developed. The task force has a large charge, and the task force's charge, Erica just dropped it in the chat, so thank you for that. The task force's charge is 7-fold. There's 11 members from the state and nonprofits and community agencies that are involved in this task force. The biggest piece that we have is really looking at developing a framework to create trauma-informed and responsive practices. We are supposed to be identifying best practices, including Native Hawaiian cultural practices. We're looking to create an inventory and assessment of public and private agencies. We're looking at what cultural practices are really working to build wellness and resilience in our communities. We are identifying and convening practitioners that are sharing research, developing research to help communities build wellness and resilience. And then lastly, we're really embarking on an effort to collect data to inform the way we utilize and go for funding streams to support the efforts of the task force, and have that embedded in the community efforts to influence and implement the framework of the trauma-informed care. So when we look at how this moved over to the Office of Wellness and Resilience, last session, there were several community advocates that wanted to really look at how do we sustainably and systematically move the task force to implement the framework that we're developing. The breakdown of Senate Bill 2482 that was introduced by Senator Donovan De La Cruz, and several community and passionate community advocates, many on this call who supported that bill, was really looking at the overall purpose to address barriers that impact physical, social, and emotional well-being, to build wellness and resilience through trauma-informed and strengths-based strategies, and really understanding how we can better support agencies as they're individually focusing on their reform efforts to address trauma-informed care and move towards a more collaborative, shared purpose of collective system reform. There's several functions of that office will take on. There's 6 total functions that office will take. And the office got signed into law. The bill got signed into law that turned into Act 291 in July of 2022. And so what that office is going to be looking at is as the task force develops the framework for how it's going to implement trauma-informed care throughout the state, that office will take that framework and implement throughout and support the state departments and working across the private sector with private donors to really look at how we can systematically infuse the framework throughout the state. The office also has several other functions, which we're looking at immediately. As soon as that office gets identified an executive director, we're looking at immediately addressing and supporting, the task force will be supporting that office to identify common issues and unmet needs encountered by the departments, to work through solving issues through the cross-representation of the state departments. It's really looking, we're going to try and have that office establish a procurement team that has cross-agency representation to streamline existing department grants and funding management. It's going to really work to interact with community agencies, organizations, and other stakeholders to identify, define, and understand what wellness and resilience means to each community, because it's going to be very different for all of our communities across the state. What does wellness look like? What does resilience look like? What works? What doesn't work? What builds that meaningful engagement and connections throughout the communities? And then lastly, that office is looking to create a social determinants of health electronic dashboard to identify the needs and concerns that really impede creating a high quality of life, and see, in my opinion, really looking to see what success and what wellness means to each of the communities, because again, that will be different throughout our state. Rural communities will define that different as urban communities, et cetera. So very, very excited to see how that office can come to fruition. We're looking to have that staffed up within the next 6 to 9 months. And then the task force is going to look to closely work with that office to support both the efforts of the task force and stand that office up to be successful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for providing us with that overview and the history of how the Office of Wellness and Resilience was formed. I'd like to turn it over now to Danny. And Danny, your question is, how did you gather the community stakeholders to make the office a reality?
Well, I think it's definitely, resilience is a kako thing, right? It's all of us, and language is power too. So one of the things I just wanted to add, a couple of things in my thoughts, is that cultural and historical trauma is there, but so is the oppression. So what are the systemic pieces that are in place that we need to address? Microaggressions, implicit and explicit biases, those type of things that kind of perpetuate the historical trauma that was faced by Generation 1. So, and I also wanted to kind of point out that the Office of Wellness and Resilience, that language is very intentional. We can tend to look at things from a deficit basis, right? When folks see the phrases trauma-informed care, we know that trauma can be passed down from one generation to the next or across the span of many generations. But we should also, we also talk that resilience can also be passed down, right? Strength-based approaches can also be passed down and has been passed down from one generation to the next. So it's kind of working with our past to work with our present, and how do we make it better for our OPO and our future. That's really, one of the things that when we galvanize community, it's very important that this isn't necessarily coming from a deficit model, but it's usually really using trauma-informed strategies so that we can both address and put into structure, systemize, so to speak, a process so that we can really promote wellness within our communities. And to kind of start addressing the question now, the power was really just coming from communities that we work with, really the grassroots, the gatekeepers, understanding the pulse of their communities, but also having key lawmakers. Senator Donovan De La Cruz, who's part of this, led this initiative. I see Senator Bonaventura on this call as well, Representative Ichiyama. Those are folks that are very key and vital in pushing this legislation through because they see the need for that. I've also been in touch with the different senators, our federal senators too. The reason why I'm mentioning all of these things, and then of course we talk about our nonprofit partners and philanthropic organizations, including our Ali'i Trust, Kamemia Schools, Lili'uokalani Trust, the Hawaii Community Foundation, Consuelo. I mean, I could go on and on, but this braiding of public-private partnerships was the answer from the community, is an answer to the community's call that we need to really join hands together and really kind of braiding a safety net. A lot of the issues and challenges that we face during the pandemic and as we emerge from the pandemic, it really existed in a lot of our rural and remote communities and even in our urban core. As we move forward and as we understand the knowledge of what the pandemic could have possibly done to we address learning loss in the Department of Education and Learning, but we also must address the needs of the social and emotional loss that also occurred during this time. And this is what the community basically shared with us. Our partners from Early Learning Office, the Office of Early Learning, as well as our Early Learning Community, our Native Hawaiian organizations, WOW, We Are Oceania, who works with our COFA migrants, all recognize the fact that there have been a lot of challenges with toxic stress within our communities during the pandemic. So galvanizing and pulling everyone together wasn't that difficult of a charge. It was more our kuleana, both our responsibility and our privilege to be part of that. And it is exactly that is motivating folks like Tia and folks on the task force to take the action steps in moving the Wellness and Resilience Office forward. So so just really mahalo to the community, and I'm just fortunate that I get to be part of and work with the community through different trauma-informed care training, wellness, and resilience building pieces of work. But just mahalo to all of the nonprofits that are on this call, all of the community members on this call, and the legislators that are on this call for doing your part in building this. Thank you.
Mahalo, Danny. It truly is a kako thing, and kako in Hawaiian means everyone. It includes everyone. And just the word kako, it is inclusive. It's an inclusive grammar phrase that we use that's inclusive of everyone, all genders, all systems, all communities. And it's so important that everyone is involved in this initiative. Question 3, this is for Tia. Why are coordination and collaboration so important to this work?
So I will just say, I've been in the state off and on since 2001, working within the state systems. And I think we have really, in my opinion, we have really come a long way to address the ability to coordinate. But that doesn't mean we don't have room to grow. So there are a lot of growth areas that we can address, and coordination and collaboration as trauma-informed care principles are something that we can focus on in our ability to continually address silos, to better be able to provide a continuity of care. When our youth and families enter our systems, our ability to communicate and understand, even the recognition of when a family comes into one of our systems, our mental health system, our juvenile justice system, our school-based behavioral health system, they might not remember everything that has happened to them. Just as I'm coming in stressed right now, we might not remember everything that we were supposed to say. We might not remember everything that we are supposed to do. And to take the time and to give the space to really recognize that stress and historical trauma and primary trauma, secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma plays a role in the way in which we show up on a daily basis. And I see that all the time, but it really does. And so to understand that when we are doing assessments, when we're asking the questions that these families and youth have been asked maybe 6 times in the last month, how are we recognizing that some of the assessments that we provide can be triggering? How do we hold space for when somebody's triggered? How do we empathetically approach and respond to the answers that they might be giving? And how do we recognize that they might not remember everything? And it's not that people are lying. It's not that people are being manipulative. It's that when we're stressed and when we come from trauma histories, our brains don't function in a way that is optimized with concentration, our ability to remember. That influences the way in which we recall information. And so just that recognition of how these principles, the trauma-informed care principles, are set into place, even when it comes to something little like assessing someone throughout our systems. The coordination of sharing that information when a family and youth consent to that sharing of information can help minimize these efforts to gather information. So if we are able to better coordinate and better collaborate across our systems, then there are benefits that can take place within our systems and how we, again, approach and respond to youth and families that have experienced trauma. The cross-sector collaboration is not new. We have been doing it in different levels. The Hawaii Interagency State Youth Network of Care, which is meeting right now. That agency is something that started back in around 2015, and it really looks at, again, it's Hawaii Interagency State Youth Network of Care, but we call it HISYNC because we love acronyms. But what that group has done is brought together the major child serving agencies to problem solve, to systematically coordinate, to share resources. We meet on a monthly basis. And it's creating relationships above and beyond everything, so that when we have a youth and family that is needing additional supports in other departments, how do we provide and identify what is best going to be with that youth and family, what they're best going to respond to. The other piece that I really wanted to point out in this question is the collaboration doesn't just mean system collaboration. What I think the state needs to, and I really would hope that we're going to be able to do with this recommendations report and the new office, is understand that collaboration very much so means collaborating with the youth and families, collaborating with the communities, talking to people that we don't normally involve in the conversation. Infusing youth voice and family voice is a huge principle in the system of care and a huge principle in trauma-informed care. And we need to continually get better and understand that the more we're able to collaborate and the more we're able to really engage youth and families, and understand from them that they are the experts in their lives, and that we are just here to provide support and offer support and services. But I really, really strongly believe that collaboration not only means, and coordination not only means across our systems and across agencies, cross sector, but very much means including voices that we don't historically invite to those conversations. First and foremost, the youth and families. The peer supports in our systems that we're working with are unbelievably effective, both parent partner supports and youth partner supports. And infusing those support systems and those and linking folks up with natural supports in their communities, in my opinion, I think is going to be a very is ongoing, very effective integration in our systems that we just need to continually work on and continually push to develop peer supports, to develop getting those voices within all of those decision-making steps. So to me, the coordination and collaboration is twofold. It's both on the systems level to be able to better coordinate on a systems level, and then really to understand how to and better infuse youth voice and peer supports in our systems. Those are going to be critical trauma-informed pieces of this work. Thank you.
Exactly. Mahalo for sharing that. And we had a couple of comments in the chat to include also peer supports with that lived experience, and really appreciating the term, the service user, to be included with decision-making and design process of services. All very important points to remember.
Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I don't know if my
Like she's
froze,
frozen.
but one of the things to add, which is also maybe some of the obstacles and challenges that we've had, I think it's just having more knowledge and insights that can be shared across. So I'm a former high school teacher. I'm a secondary educator by trade. And, if I knew more about healthy, early, and secure attachment, the 0 to 5 years and the critical years for that, PACES Connection is all about educating and activating. So my point is that we need, it's not only cross-sector as far as like maybe funding dollars or programming, but it also should be cross-sector approaches in understanding the knowledge within the lifespan that can help your practice. So let's just go with the field of education. As a high school educator, if I knew more of early learning, I would become more of an early learning advocate as well, because this is where sort of the soil becomes fertile and the plant begins to grow. I would understand more about protective factors and my role as that non-relative adult, right? If I'm the early learning provider, I may understand that some of my teachers, some of my providers, some of my parents may have struggles with their middle schooler, right? That those are very challenging years, the middle school years, or they may have a kupuna at home. We talk about negative social determinants of health who have to maybe split and share medication because they're unable to afford it. By the way, we also should really be aware that in a few months, a lot of people, hundred thousands of people will be losing some of these benefits due to some what's going to happen within our government. So I think understanding that and getting the information out. So there is siloed approaches, but also I think too, we also have to kind of open minds and open hearts to understanding the whole lifespan and where everybody is developmentally and how it affects everyone that's in our midst, the students that are in our classroom, the people that we view and work with in the community. And that's where we go to that phrase that I'm glad is finally becoming trending, that like what's what's going on with you, all right, or like what happened to you, as opposed to just that judgment lens of what's wrong with you. That's an obstacle that definitely we need to address and move forward with as we look forward to working collaboratively with one another. I also think the challenge, and I'm just going to be kind of real about this, there is a challenge when we have a governor who is terming off, and to have that, the ability to really lift that office of resilience off when the governor will term, and then a new governor will take place in the start of the new year. So once we start moving with that, and we get everything in place, I would expect that things would move quicker. But that's mechanical things that I know will work. I do think, and I just want to reiterate again, the ability for us to get more information. Dr. David Dara from Kokua-Kalihi Valley said something so profound to me that really stuck with me. He said, if we can get the very beginning of life right and the very end of life right, everything else in the middle works out, right? So if we focus on the 0 to 5 years and really develop our plans at that point, and then focus in on kupuna wellness and kupuna health, everything else in the middle works, because everybody then begins to braid and truly be ohana, which is really our family, which is the framework and really the cornerstone of our state. So it's just getting more information out. Yeah. So thanks. So that was a little bit of a ramble, but mahalo everyone. Oh, I'm sorry. I do want to say one other thing that I was going to say. I do think what we need to also have, and I see Marty asking a question there, is that having folks like the Ali'i Trust or our Royal Trust or other philanthropic organizations to have that public-private partnership that can braid with nonprofits is very critical. It is critical because of just unrestricted funding that they could bring in, but also from a federal lens. When federal people tend to also give money, they also want to see what is going on within the state. How well is public and private working together? And we are really showing that we are working together. And I know our legislators are definitely moving towards that. So I do think that what may have been a problem in the past is definitely something that we are addressing now, and we're making the best out of the resources we have. So that's another obstacle that is in and about, but I think we are addressing. Yeah.
So it looks like we are at the question and answer period. Awesome. So audience, if you have any questions for our speakers, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I will read it for you. So we have one. What are, if any, steps taken for preventative measures or traumas, or is this primarily for resolutions to existing traumas?
That's a great question. And I think when we look at, as Danny was referencing, the 0 to 5 and even the prenatal care, looking at preventative measures of trauma, always needs to be part of the conversation. Yes, we look and see how the existing traumas, how we can create healing environments for existing traumas, how we cannot re-traumatize folks. Definitely looking at minimizing triggers and the practices that kind of create triggers. Recognizing not only for doing that for those who we provide support to, but for the workforce as well. So making sure that we are showing up in a way that is balanced, in a way that is healthy, in a way that is aware and recognizing how our own current traumas or past traumas have informed the way that we behave. But the steps for preventative measures, I mean, really trying to fold in that concept of the 0 to 5 and preventing traumas really is like the biggest piece of the work. How do we not make the same mistakes as systems? How do we support families who are stressed? How do we create environments that are not triggering people is part of that preventative measure. Danny, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say, right, like my ACE score, I'll be pretty transparent. My ACE score is a 6, right? But there's nothing that anybody on this call could do to take away one of those ACEs, right? Which makes the protective factors so important. Because the protective factors are what we can put in place that prevents or mitigates the effects of trauma, but also really prevents new ACEs from potentially happening. So really putting that piece in and activating it, we can prevent trauma on the front end. And knowledge is power. And then how do we then work collaboratively with each other so that we can then educate and activate, right? Using the PACES connection language to really speak the language of wellness and resiliency. A balanced ecosystem is both resilient and resistant to foreign threat, right? So it's kind of this ku and ku-e that we need to do when it comes to this. So when we recognize something, either an entity, a situation is traumatizing, either our OPO or someone in our ohana, we both have to stand up and stand against it, stand up and stand against that. And when we do that, and when we partner kako'o with each other, in this, then we can really then begin to start addressing it both, the 3 R's, relief, recovery, and reform, right? So to provide immediate comfort for those that are experiencing it, to provide some type of way of standing up and reform, and then really then putting into what we have here, which is statute, which will really prevent future traumas because we're calling it out. And we're trying to build systems on that too. So I've always liked those 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform in the work that we do. But yeah, mahalo for your question, and mahalo for what you do in our schools too, sister. I love what you do.
Excellent.
Sorry, getting all excited already now with
Yeah.
these kind of questions.
Oh,
So it's good.
We have a very engaged audience. We have another question. Can you, and mahalo for sharing and being transparent with us. We do appreciate the experiences that people have. Can one of you also speak to the intergenerational piece? How will the office promote resiliency between generations that have experienced it?
I mean, I think that's a great question too, that when the executive director comes in, which the executive director has not been appointed yet, that's a governor appointment. So when that person is appointed and when that person staffs that office up, I see some questions about the staffing of that office. Again, that office will be housed in the governor's office. And we're waiting, we're ready and hoping for an appointment soon. But when that office gets staffed up, I think those types of questions are going to be critical. The community outreach to get folks' ideas on how the office will specifically be looking at the intergenerational piece. I think that executive director is going to be hopefully able to really solicit feedback from the communities. What does that mean to you? Because I can't answer that for this office. But I think it's going to be important to do a lot of listening to communities, a lot of gathering information to see how these big issues and very important ways can be addressed and supported. Danny, do you have anything to share to that?
No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that's the way to go, and we always want to stay engaged, right? So yeah, on a very separate topic, one of the things that I would want to ask of everyone or to think about is, if you haven't joined PACES Connection Hawaii, PACES Connection, please do, because this is a way where we can post blogs, we can post information, we can share, we can glean, there's a community event calendar too, in which we can start, really populating everything. We just ask folks to register for the website so we can prevent spamming from taking place. And if people like post wonky things in blogs, we can, gently remind them that that's not, we have rules. So that's the reason for registration. But it is a great way to echo everything that Tia said, that we have some type of way of keeping communication with each other, but also learning things from other states as well. So that would just be my add to that.
The other thing I wanted to share is I love all these questions and all these comments. The task force, the Act 209 Trauma Informed Care Task Force meets monthly, and we meet virtually on Zoom. There, again, like I mentioned, there's 11 voting members on the task force. But the way that we have set it, we've really tried to set it up, is to have as many people attend those meetings to inform the way in which our recommendations report is getting developed. And we've created permitted interaction groups. We're under sunshine law, so we have to abide by sunshine law. But the way that we've tried to really do it is to engage as many community voices as we can. So at any given month, we have between, along with our voting members, we have between, I don't know, anywhere from 30 to 90 community people joining our monthly calls, our monthly meetings. So if you want to attend our meetings and participate on our permitted interaction groups, participate. We're doing a speaker series right now. So they are definitely open to participate on. It's the last Tuesday of every month. The last Tuesday of every month and the times have changed for November. We're meeting from 9 to 1 in November, but in December, we'll go back to last Tuesday of every month from 10 to 12 noon. Love it if people could come. Erica just dropped the website for the task force. Please email her if you have any questions or want to be added to the mailing list to get those Zoom invites. But we welcome as many community folks to participate and inform that as possible. So thank you for your interest. I love it. It's good. I'm very excited too. Thank you for being here, everyone. I know we are at time, so I will turn it back over to Danny for closing thoughts, and then to Mai. Mahalo, everyone.
Yeah, no, mahalo, everyone. I just want to stick with time too, and thank you for letting us be part of your day. And this is really, truly a community effort, which is what makes it so amazing, right? It's not just a top-down thing. It's us really trying to work together as one community. So mahalo, everyone.
And we just want to close with our mahalo to you all for joining us. Thank you for asking your questions. This recording will be posted on the Hawaii Children's Trust Fund website. It's in the chat. But there are a lot of good websites in the chat. Take a moment now to save those if you desire, and we will end this webinar. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you.
Aloha, everyone.